know, we have a patriarchal society that defines being a woman as being a disease. You know, and so I gave up in 1985 trying to persuade white women that they needed to understand black women. What I switched to at that time was trying to persuade white women to understand how to be appropriately white. Because I thought that at least had a chance of succeeding. Because I will never understand fully what it means to live in a white body, or a male body, or a trans body, or, you know, a Latina body. I will never understand those things. But I can offer insight from my lived experience as a black woman, what it means to confront your own contradictions and own them, and to protest your privileges as much as you protest your pain. I do understand that as a black woman, because I'm the first one to go to college from my family, so I had to make sure that my college education didn't educate me away from my people, who I still care about and love about, love to death. I had to make sure that my radical politics didn't make it impossible to talk to my conservative family, because they're still my people. I had to make sure, and I said this earlier in my speech, that I didn't confuse women and men and everybody else in between with whom I had disagreements with people who wanted me dead. Because there is a big difference. A really, really big difference. And people who visit upon potential allies, even frenemies, the kind of response that your enemies deserve, are mighty confused. But the sad part is that usually those people like that, they don't even get within an eighth of breathing on an enemy because they're too busy making enemies of problematic allies. Yeah. And so, in about the mid-'80s, and that was when I was working at the National Organization for Women now. And that's probably when I got the label of being a moderate black feminist, because I actually sold out to the demo and started working for the largest white feminist organization in the country. And even though I had cut my chops much earlier on as being, you know, the third African-American woman to ever direct a rape crisis center in this country, and it was the first rape crisis center. Even though I started black nationalist formations and worked with the National Black United Front and started a group called International Council of African Women and all this other stuff. When I took that job at Now, half my black nationalist friends just dropped me. You would have thought that I'd put on a robe and a sheet because they felt that I had sold out. But I'm just saying all of this to preface where I am now. During my work of monitoring the Ku Klux Klan and the militias and the hate groups and on and on and on, and now I monitor the Tea Party because they're the same people. In case you're confused. And in case they are. During my work, what I learned to understand was that most of them who I would consider part of the formal white supremacist movement don't even see themselves as racist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, they really don't. And when we say things to them like white privilege, they transpose in their minds privileged whites.
Yes.
And they stand around and say, but I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm not the 1%. My life sucks.
Yep.
And they're probably right, because their life sucks in a whole lot of ways. And so our whole leftist way of talking about white supremacy and white privilege doesn't even work for them. It doesn't work to keep their hearing open. And it's kind of sad to be talking to someone who's incapable of listening to you. might as well go lay on the beach and play with yourself. In case that's the way you need to get an orgasm.
It's less painful.
Yeah, much less painful. And the beach has its own rewards. And so, what I learned, and I need to add to that story. I found that when I did deprogramming of people in the white supremacist movement, and I need to stop and explain what that means. I worked at a place called the Center for Democratic Renewal National Anti-Klan Network that was founded by Reverend C.T. Vivian, who was an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King. So, you know, very much a VIP in the civil rights, history. And C.T. came to me one day, Reverend C.T. came to me one day, and he said, well, Loretta, I need you to join and work with Leonard Jeskin, I talked about him earlier, in helping people leave the hate movement. I said, well, what you talking about? He said, when we ask people to give up hate, then we need to be there for them when they do.
Huh. Wow.
I went, oh shit. Because we barely had the resources to help the victims of hate violence.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you figured out that we're supposed to work with the perpetrators?
Mm-hmm.
Even the ex-perpetrators? I didn't get it. But thankfully, C.T. was very patient with me. And he helped me understand that we've got real enemies, and then we got a whole lot of confused middle. And then we've got the choir that we reportedly are preaching to. And so that's when my thinking really took a sharp turn, because I realized when I was doing the deprogramming of ex-Nazis and ex-Klan members and stuff like that I couldn't even hate people who'd been in the Klan. Now, you can't hate somebody in the Klan. Who the hell can you hate? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, up until that point, I tended to not see them as human. I actually did not respect their humanity. I used to actually use this phrase. They're like roaches. They only come out when you turn the lights out. Which is an awful way to describe a human being. An awful way. And so, once I discovered that I was incapable of hating the Klan, trust me, those problematic white women that now suddenly became my nearest and dearest. So I just say all of that to say that I've learned over time that there's a left wing and a center wing and a right wing of the women's movement.
Yes.
And I'm going to find my most likeliest allies in that left and that center. I'm going to find my least likeliest allies in that right wing. But I would also add that even most conservative right-wing feminists, again, they believe in feminism of their own definition, and they don't see themselves as particularly hateful. Okay, so this is the world we're living in. What I found in my left wing and my center feminists, white feminists, is a strong desire to, quote, recruit and work with women of color without the least skills on how to do it. And so the white organizations that they run become revolving doors for women of color. Because they'll get one in, she'll stay a while, then she'll silently leave, never having an exit interview about what was going on. And then they try again, and then try again, and then they're feeling bad about themselves. And once in a while, the woman of color will give an exit interview as she's leaving. And that's almost worse, because she calls everybody body of mother on our way out the door and makes the white women who tried to create the space, however ineptly they did so, I ain't hiring that thing then. I ain't going there again. I know I should be diversified as an organization, but I ain't getting hurt like that no more. You know? So, these are the things I learned in 40 years of working in the women's movement. And I'm probably a bit touchy about those 40 years because it pisses me off when people say the white women's movement. Because that just erases my history. You know, just because there weren't a whole lot of us don't mean we weren't there at all. Like I said, I directed the very damn first rape crisis center in this country. The entire movement against violence against women was built by black women. You know, so don't act like the white women's movement, the women's movement was only white. Even though mainstream media likes to portray only very powerful white women as representative of that movement. But that's a fault of mainstream media. That isn't an accurate description of who created change in America. I actually am really good friends with Gloria Steinem. And Gloria and I have fought many, many battles, and then we, you know, make up, love, and all that stuff. I think if neither of us were addicted to dick, we'd be lovers. I mean, it is a thing, man. I call it an addiction because I love becoming in women. Oh, and then I just want to fuck them and kick them out. You know, I'm like, don't talk. So I describe it as an addiction.
An addiction.
Exactly. The emphasis on that. So, anyway, back to Gloria. Yeah, can I help you?
No.
Okay.
Reclaim this stuff.
Okay. And so back to Gloria. She came out with an article, or actually an interview a couple of weeks ago, where she said that without black women, there'd be no feminist movement. Y'all remember seeing that? Yeah. So I had to call her and say, hey, girlfriend. I knew you felt that way, but this is the most I've heard you say that publicly. And so I just want to give a shout out. Glad you did. Glad you said it. And I'm not saying we did it alone. I'm not saying that we did it first. I'm just saying that we did it. Because only white supremacy insists on trying to define who was first, who was alone, who is, you know, king, and everybody else steps back. We don't have to have that primacy discussion and have it make sense. I've been too long of an introduction. Let me start talking about why I know why I'm doing a long introduction, because I was leading y'all to why I'm talking about appropriate whiteness. I think I'm a little tired. I flew and traveled 16 hours yesterday to get here. And my feet are swollen right now, because they haven't been elevated above my heart, so my edema is serious right now. And so as soon as I get through this workshop, I'm running and putting my feet up. But
I totally. I'll get comfortable.
oh no, honey, you don't want to look up my cootie. I got it. No, just putting him on a chair doesn't get this edema. But anyway, thanks for giving me permission, I guess, because I would have done it if I thought I needed to do it that way. But moving on. I'm talking about appropriate whiteness. Oh, I guess I'll give one other little introduction. In 2011, I was in Mississippi because Mississippi had on the ballot a personhood amendment,
Yep.
claiming that all fetuses are persons. And so if this ballot initiative went through, Initiative 26, they would have amended the Mississippi Constitution so that it would have prohibited not only abortion, but many forms of birth control. And possibly resulting in the criminalization of women who chose to have abortion. And by the way, it would have also criminalized women who had miscarriages, like Purvi Patel, because abortions and miscarriages are forensically indistinguishable after the fact. Yeah, so this was Mississippi, goddamn Mississippi. Anyway, I went to Mississippi to work on the personhood campaign and try to persuade Black Mississippians to oppose the personhood campaign. The reason that was important is because the majority of the Democratic voters in Mississippi are African American. The majority, the overwhelming vast majority of the white voters in Mississippi are Republican. So to defeat this amendment, we needed the African American voters to turn out, the Democratic voters to turn out. And so I went to Mississippi with that in mind. But when I got to Mississippi, I found much to my surprise that there was a second amendment on the ballot, Amendment 27, which was a voting rights amendment, which basically was going to restrict voting for large numbers of people, including Black people, older people, students, women who don't have the right last name or whatever. Just a voting disenfranchisement taking place, what they call voter ID. And so that was a no-brainer for me to also work against 27, because we're talking about Mississippi, where people died for the right to vote. So it wasn't a no-brainer as a Black feminist to work on personhood and voting rights at the same time. What a novel idea that is. I found out, though, that my mainstream feminist colleagues didn't agree with me, because they were ready to spend millions of dollars defeating personhood and wouldn't spend a dime defeating voter ID.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was just befuddled. I said, what kind of political campaign gets launched where you don't target your most likely voters? I had never seen that in the history of politics. You think Hillary Clinton is not going to target her most likely voters? Or just ignore us as she tries to deal with somebody else? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know Barack Obama fainted to the left and moved right, but he at least fainted to the left. He knew that. And so when I got there and discovered that my pro-choice allies were not willing to do any lift against voter ID, but were going to do everything they could to stop personhood from succeeding based on the turnout of the African American vote, I got pissed off to the heights of pissing. Not me, Robin Morgan said that one time. Robin Harris. You know Bebe's kids? If you don't know. Y'all know Bebe. Who's heard of Bebe's kids, okay? I know it's a generational thing. Anyway, that's when it crystallized in my brain that I need to stop just talking about white supremacy in the women's movement. I need to do something about it. Because we don't need more Mississippis where personhood was defeated and the voter ID bill became law.
No. Wow.
Yes. That's what happened. And I got told by my friends that I just didn't understand how politics really worked.
Oh,
Because they were there to defeat personhood. No one had instructed them to work on voter ID. Sadly, they had a lot of black people working for them who were giving them that kind of advice. Because they felt that if they just had hired black consultants and black pollsters and get a nod from them black people that they didn't have to work on voter ID, that was all the political cover they needed. Don't they know what a house Negro looks like? Apparently not. You know? So I decided that the women's movement, of which I want to be proud, knows how to apply intersectionality in politics. You know, and manages to keep two thoughts in the brain at the same time. You know? And what makes it so immeasurably stupid is that the Feminist Majority Foundation estimates that voter ID bills across the country are disenfranchising 5 million women, voters. So if you couldn't do it for the black folks, do you think you can do it for your fucking self?
Right?
I mean, don't do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's the smart thing to do. Can you figure that out? Can you figure that if fewer progressives vote in Mississippi, the Republicans are going to pack the legislature even more, tilting against us? The threat to the last remaining abortion clinic becomes stronger? Because you are pissing off the very people that can statistically make that not happen. Because you just want to report a win by any means necessary. So that crystallized in my mind a talk I need to give on appropriate whiteness, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm sorry for such a long-winded introduction, but I'm a feminist first. That's the movement that I grew up in, nurtured in, helped influence, helped grow. And it's a movement that I'm tired of being ashamed of. You know, I'm tired of young women saying, walk around saying, I'm not a feminist. I'm really tired of that because we haven't given them a reason or anything they can say yes to.
Right.
You know, you can't tell the difference between a feminist conference and the Great Panthers nowadays. Every day. And I don't mind being an old bitch. I love it. But I don't want to only be with old bitches.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm going to talk about white supremacy today. What I need is some logistical help. What time is this workshop supposed to be over?
4:20.
And what time is it locally?
3:27.
So I got approximately 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
Would someone give me like a 25 minutes before, 20 minutes before it's over, like at 4 o'clock, a heads up so that we can get into some Q&A?
Sure.
Is that okay? At 4 o'clock.
We'll all tell you when it's 4.
Okay.
Someone will remember it.
And if I don't listen, come up and slap me. It's okay. Might make me come. Anyway. Hey, there's a reason that the last conferences I organized were all called Let's Talk About Sex, baby. It is always on my mind. It seems like the less I have, the more I dream. But that's all right. Yeah. And that's one thing I like about being old. When you're old, you can say stuff like that and you don't even care if anybody don't like it. You know, I have these conversations with my brothers and sisters now that I could not imagine happened 40 years ago. Because you get to a certain age, you don't care about other people's opinions of you. But moving right along. In order to deal with appropriate whiteness, the first thing you've got to do is understand the ideology of white supremacy. White supremacy is an ideology, a set of ideas. It is not a description of a race of people. Because you don't even have to be white to believe in white supremacy.
Right.
What do you think Ben Carson does? He's that black neurosurgeon that I'm glad never operated on my brain because he's dumb as shit when it comes to politics and reality and stuff. So white supremacy is an ideology. And white privilege is its practice. Just like pornography is the theory and ideology of violence against women, and rape becomes its practice. And so you can't deconstruct white supremacy or reconstruct appropriate whiteness without understanding the ideology and the practices of white supremacy. Do y'all follow me so far?
Yep.
And one of the things that white people need to do to be appropriately white is stop flinching every time we say the word white supremacy. Because if we just called your mama something. Because you don't flinch when I say patriarchy, and I might have just called your daddy something. You know?
That's right.
I mean, it is about embracing a set of ideas. And we got people in our families that embrace those ideas. Let's admit it. You know, and we throw the F-bombs over the Thanksgiving turkey dinners to try to out them about it, or at least just turn everybody's appetite off. So white supremacy is not limited to being in the Klan or just, saying the N-word inappropriately. White supremacy is a totalizing system on which this country was founded. It was a settler colonial state. There were people here that we wanted to pretend did not exist, that we wanted to wipe out, so that, and I'm saying we in the generic sense, because obviously I was not one of the founding fathers. But I'm talking about we as the Americans. And one of the ways we decided to colonize this country was to construct rigid racial boundaries, like Virginia did in the 1600s, to define who was in the American franchise and who was not. And they did it on the color line. So that's where whiteness was even created. Before it was French, German, British, Italian, Croatian, It wasn't about being white, it was about coming from a country of origin. But in order to decide whose babies mattered and whose babies didn't, they had to create this construct called whiteness. And they did. And they had to police all sexual relations. And they did. I mean, we just got laws against interracial marriage off the books recently, like in the 20th century. Exactly. And so it was created as a body of ideas that would then go on to construct a legal system that reified it, that sanctified it and blessed it and concretized it, and then became an arrangement of privilege and disadvantage. So I don't necessarily want to hear from any white person that says, I didn't own slaves. Well, hell, you also probably don't own a goat. What the fuck is that to anything, But you'd be looked at a little skeptically if you tried to claim that you're white without benefiting from white privilege.
Yes.
Just like it's hard to countenance a man saying, I don't rape women, so how can I benefit from violence against women?
Right.
I like making these useful analogies to patriarchy. A lot of times white women don't get it when you just leave it at race. So when you show the parallel to patriarchy, they're like, yeah, I get that. And it's a totalizing system, such a totalizing system that it's a sea that we all swim in. And that's why many people who are not white have imbibed ideas of white supremacy. I want to talk about the 4 primary categories of white supremacy. This is how I demarcate them. You know, somebody else, some other analyst will probably say them in a different way. But I tend to think the most important category of white supremacy there is called the far right. Because they're the people whose job it is to maintain, obviously, the ideology of white supremacy. You know, they're the ones that moan about the death of Western civilization and tell white women they shouldn't have abortion because you're exterminating the white race, and we should, you know, ban these illegal immigrants because they're contaminating our Christian nation, and blah, 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 blah. You've heard it all. Right. Their role is to give up those ideas. The next sector of white supremacy that we have to deal with is known as the religious right. Because they're the ones whose job is to wrap a moral culture around the ideas of white supremacy. So they're the ones that say, oh my God, being poor means that you're a part of a sinful community that's so dependent.
Yep.
That's so dependent. You have a culture of poverty going on.
That's right.
You know, being a self-empowered woman choosing to have sex without babies, you're a whore. And Jesus doesn't like you for that. On and on and on. And all of those immigrants coming over here, especially from Mexico, they might be Christians, but they're not the right kind.
They might be Catholic.
And they're only coming over here to breed anyway. Have anger babies.
Take our jobs.
Yes. Then the next category is what I call the paleo-conservative, because I compare them to dinosaurs. But they're like the ultra-conservatives, who wrap the same white supremacist ideas, not with a religious cover, but with an economic cover.
Yes. Capitalism.
Yeah. Oh, we cannot afford affirmative action.
Right.
We cannot afford to let these immigrants in and be a drain on our healthcare system. We cannot afford to let women have control over their reproduction. We cannot afford, well, we can't afford endless wars.
Yeah.
And then the 4th category of what I call the traditionalists, because it's their job to implement the practice of white supremacy. So they're the cops who see a person's color before they see a person's humanity. Or the person in the drugstore, in the department store, saw a black woman walk in and accused her of shoplifting before they recognized he was talking to Oprah Winfrey. Y'all remember Oprah getting racially profiled in a department store? That's white privilege in practice, by the way. And so, that body of ideas, like on the video, they have the slideshows where if you saw the crying, screaming 16-year-old pregnant woman coming to the hospital, what would be your first ideas about her? That's what I'm talking about. That's how white supremacy has affected our thinking without us being even aware that we drank the Kool-Aid. Even that we don't even know it. So this is what I'm talking about. To maintain itself as an ideology, white supremacy counts on 3 main, I guess I went to 3s and threesomes. 3 main pillars. First of all, it counts on the blood purity of whiteness. So that's why it's absolutely opposed at every level to interracial mixing, whether it's sexually, religiously, in the schools, at prom. That was going to manifest. We don't want that. Secondly, it has very rigid boundaries around race, religion, class, and citizenship. So that's why white supremacists, without even knowing it, will ask an Asian woman, "You speak good English. How long have you been here?" Mm-hmm. And she'll reply, "Before your parents got here, apparently." You know what I'm saying? Just rigid ideas. And that's why they are so batshit crazy right now around the trans movement. Because the boundaries of gender have never been so, dare I say, transgressed as they are right now. That binary is being shut the fuck up. And they don't know what to do with it. And yet it's confusing them. Because the Republicans who want to use white supremacy are finding much to their dismay that they can't fight gay marriage. But they can always criminalize abortion. So they're really confused right now. Have you noticed? Mm-hmm. You know, they cannot find themselves to say, "Whoa, I know I'm not into these loose things of these gender binaries and stuff like that, nuclear marriage." But I would argue too, part of it is just common sense. Most of the people fighting gay marriage were unable to defend their own damn marriages. I actually had to call my girlfriend out on that. My girlfriend, my best friend's name Lily. She goes to this church that was leading a march against gay marriage, a black church. You know, what's his name? Eddie Long's church. Bishop Eddie Long, you know, pedophile who got busted. Right. But she goes to his church. A pedophile leading an anti-gay march. How surprised are you at that? Against men. I mean, a queer pedophile. I'm not just talking about people just into women. He was not. Anyway, so Lily's been married 3 times. And how the hell can you be in defense of marriage? You didn't defend these in your 3 marriages. Because your ass is as single as mine and I ain't been married never. What's up with this? How confused can you be? Under the leadership of a pedophile. Oh, Jesus, save me from your followers. Not original, that's a bumper sticker. The third pillar of white supremacy, of course, and I described this, is reinforcing the patriarchy, which of course means reinforcing transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, on and on and on. And so you got to talk about blood purity, you got to talk about rigid boundaries, you got to talk about patriarchy, homophobia. And what the scholarly amongst us call a heteronormative patriarchal society. I try not to use words like heteronormative, because I don't think I can spell them. No, but it's just, yeah. When you get into academics, your job is to confuse, not to clarify. Well, I'm trying to resist that impulse as much as I can. And so, let's talk about appropriate whiteness. Okay? Because I've been talking around it a lot. But before I even talk about it, I think it's really important to talk about how it hurts white people. First of all, it makes white people resent successful black people and other people of color. And they think that, well, if President Obama is black, how can there still be racism in America? Ask the Tea Party, hell, I don't know. But I should also add that Obama would not have become president if 43% of the white vote hadn't voted for him.
Yep.
So it's very important to pay attention, not to the 57% who didn't, but how can we bring into our ranks the 43% who did? So maybe we've been aiming our conversations at the wrong set of white folks. Because I'm much more about figuring out how to keep that 43% with us than having them defect again back to the ranks of the Tea Party. Because we started using our identity politics to bully them. Because they didn't know the right word to say, or they didn't eat the right food, or they still like football or something that causes us to think that we're better than them. Yeah. The other thing is that white supremacy makes white people think that we don't work as hard as white folks. Actually, I don't work as hard as I used to, but that's a matter of age and predisposition. And it got nothing to do with my race or my gender. I was actually talking to someone the other day, and she was delighting in how she just got in this car and what a nice privilege it was to be driving around in a car. And I swear I just had to just shake my head and say, you know, the first 7 years of my child's life, I was on a bus. And putting a baby carriage on a bus to get to 2 different jobs and daycare and after school care and all the other things necessary to parent as a poor person makes me allergic to public transportation nowadays. I mean, I have to be in dire straits to choose to get on a bus again. Whereas for some people, it's liberating us from, you know, the damage of single passenger cars to the environment. And finding a parking space, that's true. I do happen to live in the South, so parking is not as big a problem down there, but we have our own problem. Also, white supremacy makes white people afraid to talk about it.
Yes.
And seriously afraid that if they talk about it the wrong way, that they're going to be called racist. And it makes people assume, white people assume that every person of color wants to talk about it with them. Trust me, people, I'm pretty rare. And I'm not saying that because I'm special. I'm saying that because I've analyzed what kind of revolutionary work I want to do. And that is to be that bridge. Y'all remember that book, This Bridge Called My Back? Which Sherry Moran is reissuing this year, which I'm real excited about. The metaphor that I took from the bridge is that a bridge just lays there, and people walk across it to get to the other side. Their eyes are on their destination, not on that bridge. Because the bridge is just a mechanism to get somewhere. It is not where you stop. And so I like to think of myself as that bridge between black feminism and white feminism, between men and women, between young and old and all that. But the problem with being a bridge is that you also have to accept that being in that bridge position means being largely invisible. Because people are not looking at the damn bridge. They're looking at their destination, and that's what they should be doing. So if you have a need to be in a political struggle in a way that says, look at me, look at me, look at me, you ain't ready to be a bridge. Don't even try it. Because you're not qualified. But that's okay. And so what happens is that a lot of people of color get jettisoned into the bridge role by white people, and people of color say, oh, hell to the no. Go home and do your homework. You work as hard as I work to get to this consciousness. You see how that works out? So be selective. I'm a bridge. You can ask me any question, I won't think it's stupid. do not assume that every black woman with dreadlocks feels that same way. Or somebody gonna slap you. Metaphorically or physically. The other thing white supremacy does to us is that it makes us feel stupid. And we believe in the fears versus the facts. How many people are looking at Baltimore and repeating the media's phrase, there's riots are taking place, there's riots taking place. Some of us might describe that as a justified uprising.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved when that Ferguson guy, that guy from the Ferguson protest, school Wolf Blitzer. Did y'all read about that? Mm-hmm. He told Wolf Blitzer, you're more worried about broken windows than broken spines?
Yep.
Yeah. A window can be fixed. A broken spine can't. And yet we find ourselves inadvertently or unconsciously repeating these white supremacist memes, using words like riots and thugs, and on and on and on, objectifying people who have a legitimate grievance against the state security apparatus that is designed to terrorize and imprison.
Yes.
For the further accumulation of white wealth, by the way. It's not just so that because they don't want to look at us. It's about wealth building in America, whether it's AIG, Citibank, Aetna Insurance, has been built on the enslavement of black people and the genocide of Native Americans, and it continues to this day, no matter how proud their reputations are. And so when black people talk about reparations, we're not just whistling in the dark. We know who to hold accountable. We know who. Repeating myths, that's something that always happens. And it keeps poverty going on, because why can't you divide the poor blacks against the poor whites, and the poor Mexicans against the poor Japanese, and Well, actually, there aren't that many poor Japanese that get here. You know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of poor Asian Americans, though, like the Hmong, Thai people. Most of our nail salons in my community are run by Vietnamese women, escaping poverty out in their own countries. I think one of the other ways it hurts white feminists is that white supremacy helps us miss the rich diversity of leadership that's possible. And it normalizes itself, and it normalizes racial violence. And this is probably the thing that hurts me the most, is that it makes the feminist movement divide itself intergenerationally. Which is so self-destructive. And my yoga-loving friend says it takes away inner peace. I'm not full of inner peace. I'm full of gas. I suspect that inner peace matters to some people. And it becomes very predictive because it says, white supremacy says that there's only one way to be something. So we incorporate that in saying that there's only one way to be a feminist. There's only one way to be a birth activist. There's only one way to be a doula. There's only one way to be, and it's my way. And it divided tribes. So let me close with my last 6 minutes to talk about what can we do to be appropriately white. Well, y'all can do it. I ain't trying to be appropriately white. I think I used the word earlier about moving from allyship to co-conspirators. I didn't create that. That's an indigenous reframing that I'm using. But I do need co-conspirators in the deconstruction of white supremacy. So that's the goal. Okay? So I'm not going to put up on the board, 10 things that you can do about being nicer to black folks, like don't ask about our hair. Those are the kinds of things you should have learned in kindergarten any damn way. Yeah. So you can get 1 million books and learn about how to be an adult and not touch somebody else's stuff inappropriately. Yeah. So that ain't the talk. That ain't this talk. Okay? about IB co-conspirators in the deconstruction of what this thing called white supremacy. And that's what I'm talking about appropriate whiteness for. I don't care if you like rap music. I don't care if you got enough money to buy all the African art I can't afford. I don't care. Because I just care whether or not you've got the staying power over the long term to deconstruct white supremacy. And if you choose it by wrapping yourself in black culture and wiggering your way out of life, that's fine. Y'all know what a wigger is, right? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, no. A wigger is what white supremacists call a white nigger. A person who has embraced black culture without necessarily embracing black people. There is a difference. So what can white feminists do? Be co-conspirators, because I think that one thing that white feminists, number one thing they can offer an anti-white supremacist movement is legitimating and legitimizing potential. When I say America is racist, they yawn. When white people say America is racist, they listen.
Yes.
You can legitimate the struggle against white supremacy in a way that no black person ever can. They hated Martin Luther King when he was alive. He only became a martyr because he died and 20 years had passed. You know? Yeah, now they got hamburgers named after him. And so use your legitimizing potential. I also think that an appropriate response would be to weaponize your privilege. And that's different from weaponizing your consciousness that I talked about earlier. I find that I have many white feminist friends who have access to money and power and spaces I never have access to. I tried to get a good friend of mine when I was working at NOW to participate in protests at the South African Embassy in 1986. Because that was one of our strategies, one of our tactics was to keep people getting arrested at the South African Embassy as a way to call attention to apartheid, hopefully to bring it down. And Julie, I'll never forget, looked at me one day and she said, I don't think I'm gonna do that. And I kind of like talked to the hand, you know, because getting arrested at the South African Embassy was nothing. I mean, 300 people a day were getting arrested. Congressmen, presidents, everybody was getting arrested at the South African Embassy at the height of the Free South Africa movement. So it wasn't what you call high-risk behavior. So when Julie told me no, my opinion of her just plummeted. Because remember, this was back in the day when I was trying to convince myself that white women, if I could just show white women the reality of black women, that would be what makes a difference. And so Julie and I kind of stopped hanging out together after that. And she could tell that there was a chill in our relationship. But about 3 months after that, Julie asked me to go to lunch with her. And I said, okay, you know, it's been a long time since you asked me that. I'll go see what you got to say. She opened up the lunch and saying, Loretta, the reason that I couldn't go with you to the South African Embassy was because of who my family is. I said, what you mean? What you talking about? She said, over the weekend, I persuaded my family to divest from South Africa because my grandfather started IBM Corporation. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? She said, yeah, that IBM. And I had to spend the last 3 months persuading my mother, my brother, my cousins, all these people that we needed to pull out of South Africa. And I was like speechless. By the way, her cousin is the woman that started Emily's List, Ellen Malcolm, who's also an heir to the IBM fortune. So, that was an example of Julie weaponizing her privilege in the service of justice. I would have never had access to the board of directors of IBM Corporation and caused them to divest, but she did. And she was able to do it and did so silently. So so she wasn't doing it so she could draw attention to it. So, hey, what a good anti-racist, anti-apartheid activist. Look at me, look at me, look at me. But she was reconciling my request with her reality. And so she chose to act at a stage that I would have never had any access to. That's what I call weaponizing privilege. Don't write me a damn check. I'm going to take it to the casino, maybe. You know? But I can appreciate that each of you with privilege, and each of us with privilege actually, can use that privilege in a way that serves the cause of justice. And understand, the cause of justice is there to be served, not to serve us. And that really pisses me off. When people enter our struggle and then spend their time saying, what about me? What about my needs? Oh, yeah. The movement nature of personal therapy. They got pros for that. I use one every week. You know? And so, and I'm not saying that's just white people, because I have worked with so many young women of color who come into the movement thinking that the movement is supposed to serve them. You know? Oh, I had a big fight with some of my staff and sister song in the early days because I was insisting. Yes.
It's 4.
Oh, it's 4 o'clock. Let me hurry.
No, you've got. What time is it? 4.
4:20.
Yeah, it goes on to 4:20, right?
Yeah.
But I need to give you all time to do that. So anyway, just to tell the story, then I'll go through these last ones real fast. We do a lot of work among women who are churched, women who go to churches and stuff like that. So we get the opportunity to speak to churches about issues usually not talked about in church, which is sex, sexuality, abortion, birth control, incest, domestic violence, you name it. And so the big fight I had with my staff was that I was insisting that either they wore pants to go to those opportunities or they wore a dress that could not be seen through. You can't walk in there looking like a sex worker and expect anybody to pay attention to what you said because you've disrespected them with your presentation. It ain't about you. So if you got to be look like a sex worker, go somewhere else where looking like a sex worker can be more appropriate. I'll send you to the student conference or something. You know? Hell, I might put you out there on the street and see if you can actually earn some of your earned income. But I am not. Yeah, I'm willing to pimp for the movement too. Oh, hell, I've already sold pussy, so I'm not going to be in charge of selling others. But anyway, I just wanted to say how we have to not expect the movement to serve us. To serve the movement. That's the only thing I said. So let me run through these last things. I think that white feminists, to be appropriately white, are freer to act. You know?
Can you say that again?
I think white feminists, to be appropriate, are freer to act. I think white feminists could walk up to a cop and say, why did you shoot that man and not get shot in return?
Might get tear gassed.
Huh? Might get kissed.
No, tear gassed.
Tear gas. Well, tear gas is survivable. I've been there.
Okay.
Like, you can recover from tear gas. You cannot recover from a broken spine.
You really can't.
Okay? Been there, done that during the riots of the 60s. So you're freer to act. You know, it may be that y'all can go to that hospital and say, hey, excuse me, I just escorted somebody in here and y'all treated her like shit.
Yeah.
And I'm here to call that out. Call attention to that. I think that white feminists can bring greater resources to the struggle. Not always money, but knowledge of who you know. One of the things that I encouraged my white allies to do back in the 90s was to teach us poor women how to better manage finances. Because unless you had some finances to fucking manage, you didn't get that memo. You learned how to live on food stamps and hustling.
Yeah.
That's different than managing a bank account. negotiating a cheaper home mortgage, interest payment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are skills many of you already know that need to be shared. Just life survival skills. Building leadership is something white women can do very well. But remember my phrase earlier, standing in solidarity does not mean standing in front. When those anti-abortion billboards appeared up in Atlanta saying that the most dangerous place for a black child is in the womb and black children are an endangered species, I almost had to slap my white allies and say, step back. This ain't your struggle. You had 90 years to be and still are incapable of talking about racism in your organization. And I think y'all know who the 90-year reproductive health organization is I may be referring to. Because that one's been around that long. Right? This is your time to stand in solidarity, not stand in front. Yeah. Even though they're mentioning your name in the attack. Yeah. And so it was a very painful process to have that conversation, but it worked. We defeated the legislation. In a red state, we defeated an anti-abortion bill in a red state with the leadership of black women. Wow. You know? Wow. But it was about sharing leadership skills, getting that predominantly powerful white organization to teach my staff how to do successful media interviews, for example, or, you know, we got called by the New York Times. It was a white ally at Smith College who sent me evidence that W.E.B. Du Bois had supported Margaret Sanger, which I was able to flip the whole narrative around. When they were saying abortion is genocide, I said, oh, so you're accusing W.E.B. Du Bois of genocide? Is that what you're actually saying? You know, that kind of stuff. And I think that white feminists bring representation, authenticity, and symbolism to the struggle. Because we know one of the aspects of white supremacy is to force and compel white women to breed. Yes. To remove abortion, birth control, support for woman-controlled births, and all of that from the conversation. It is really about the Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, that was more than a metaphor. And so when white women choose to resist forced breeding of whiteness, I think that's powerfully symbolic. Yeah. And then white women should be on the front line of challenging white guilt and false subordination. Because there ain't nothing worse than when a white person is supposed to speak up to white people and they say, oh, that's you, Loretta, I'm stepping back. Right. So, you notice I didn't talk about what you should do is become the ally or savior role. Or pretend that we are all the same. I don't see your color, Loretta. Oh, honey. I said, you can't see a 300-pound black woman in front of you. What is wrong with your eyes? Yeah. And there's a correlation to the speech that I gave that's called Measuring the Empowerment of Women of Color and White Organizations, and that is steps you can actually do. If you choose to hire women of color in your organization, there are very specific things you can do